Hello, and welcome to our webinar on employee financial stress. My name is Linda Keller, and I am the National Employee Benefits Practice Leader for HUB. Today's historically low unemployment levels are obscuring the true nature of people's financial lives. In fact, millions of Americans are struggling. Total household debt is higher than it was before the financial crisis of 2008. Baby boomers are nearing retirement with insufficient savings. Americans of all ages are buried under mounting student loan debt. We need to look beyond the employment headlines to understand the true state of Americans' financial lives. I'm joined today by Michelle Clark, Heather Garbers, and Dave Reich. Michelle is HUB's Health and Performance Practice Leader for the Central Region and an expert on employee engagement. Heather Garber leads the Voluntary Benefits Practice for the Pacific Region and consults with our clients on how to create customizable benefit solutions to promote employee well-being. Dave Reich is the head of HUB's Investment Advisory Services and leads our retirement team. We're going to spend some time today to show you why there is such a high demand for financial wellness, define what it means, provide some solutions to address it, and explain why retirement is such a key component to overall financial health. We'll also have a Q&A following the event that you can join. But first, let's talk about employee financial stress. Almost 50% of employees say their spending equals or exceeds their income. As a result of this, employees use credit to make ends meet. Almost half of them do not have enough savings to cover their living expenses for 3 months, and as a result, only 42% have no retirement savings. Why is this a problem for you? Financial stress is negatively impacting employees and costing employers. Financially stressed employees are less productive, take more time off, and are higher utilizers of health care. But the problem is more far-reaching than that. The less prepared older employees are for retirement, the longer they remain in the workforce, which can result in higher salaries and healthcare costs for employers, as well as challenges in retaining younger employees who are denied advancement opportunities. Today's webinar will explore what you can do to help address this crisis, and in doing so, improve workplace productivity. Let's start with Michelle Clark, who will talk about how employee financial stress drains productivity. Michelle?
Thank you, Linda. I am so excited to start off the conversation first by framing why financial wellness would be a great investment for any organization. And so let's first address the productivity drain from employee financial stress. 46% of workers spend 3 or more hours per week thinking about their money while they're at work. And that results in an estimated $5,000 more in employee costs per year through lost productivity, which can cost the average employer almost as much in lost productivity as tobacco use. And when we look at the financial wellness landscape, it's somewhat of a bleak picture. More and more people are struggling to meet monthly expenses. They say that finance-related stress is worse this year than it was last year. And more than half of the U.S. workers state that they are indeed financially stressed. And adding to that problem is that almost 2/3 of employees say that they lack even the basic financial literacy to take control of their situation. So with that, what's even more enlightening is that most employers, and let me see if I can get the screen to change there. There we go. They say that financial stress manifests itself in many physical ways for the employee. When someone's stressed out over money, they're more likely to turn to food, alcohol, drugs, coping mechanisms, which causes them to then spiral even more out of control. And so you as the employer might see that impact by way of employees asking for things like payday advances. They're having wage garnishments, accidents while on the job due to distraction, and even increased substance abuse problems or theft, extreme tardiness, absenteeism, you name it. And so, I'm sorry, I need to go back to there we go. As far as seeing it in medical claims, you might see it in high rates of medications that are associated with back pain, like muscle relaxants, opioids, anxiety medications, or sleeping pills. And so that's why you as the employer are in a very unique position to be able to help. You can easily provide access to programs that educate and engage employees in better managing the money that they have so that they can be as productive and healthy as possible. And based on these factors, financial wellness is probably, I would say, the single most important initiative that an employer can invest in that would have a wide range of impacts across all facets of your business. I want to go back here real quickly and just mention a couple things on the links between health and financial issues. They are inextricably linked. Most organizations that we talk to are really surprised at that correlation between physical and financial health. According to a recent survey, 42% of employees report being both physically unhealthy and financially worried. It's almost half of any given population of workers. And they also report considerably higher stress levels, more absences and presenteeism issues, and of course, significantly lower levels of work engagement. So a lot of organizations really are looking at these numbers and reevaluating their well-being programs to include financial wellness programs in an effort to just help employees with both their physical and financial well-being. All right, so a couple of other things as far as what I'd like you to do, and because we want to make this as interactive as possible, let's take a minute here to do just a simple calculation so that you can see for your own organization what the impact of financial distress might be having on your workplace. So let's walk through this together. First thing I'd like you to do is just take your average hourly pay per worker. Just assume, estimate what it is at this point. Then multiply that by the 3 hours of lost productivity that per week, and then again by 46 average weeks in a year, which is around the number of weeks that are actually worked after people are taking time off for vacations or sick time. And then take that number, which is the total annual productivity loss per worker, and now multiply that by the number of workers who are in your organization. And that, folks, is the financial impact to your bottom line due to financial distress that's experienced by your people. So let me show you an example of this in action for a company with about 250 employees. So let's say that their average hourly worker per pay is around $17 an hour. Multiply that out by 3 lost productivity hours per week times 46 weeks in a year. That's about $2,300 per worker. When you average out that cost across the number of workers in your organization, that's more than $500,000. So it's really, truly impacting the success of your business, and you might not even know that it's going on. So it's just a way to highlight and really put some numbers to the bottom line of financial stress. All right, so with all that being said, let's touch real quickly on what financial wellness even is. So financial wellness program really should be helping your people develop the knowledge, the skills, and the habits, as well as providing them some resources to, one, have control over their month-to-month expenses. They need to have some sort of capacity to deal with the unexpected, aka having an emergency fund in place. We want them to be able to learn how to live within their means, not have exposure to risks that could wipe them out, for example, having access to or being able to pay for medical coverage and copays. They need to have a plan for meeting some of their financial goals. And then best, but not least, is really just having some sort of sense of enjoyment in life, because otherwise, what in the heck are we even doing, right? So here's a little bit of a deeper explanation of the ways that a financial wellness initiative can help your employees gain that financial confidence that they need to manage the money that you do pay them. Because again, you pay them really well, but again, if they're not feeling like they're able to manage their money, then it doesn't matter how much you pay them, they're always going to feel like they're falling behind. So the first thing is knowledge. This is just basic financial literacy 101. Things as simple as knowing how to balance a checkbook or how to create a budget, how to stick to a spending plan. We want to help them build some skills, and that's all about learning how to budget, how to save, how to invest their money effectively. And then, of course, the habits are those daily behaviors that actually ultimately lead to results. It's something as simple as, instead of going out to lunch, 3-4 times a week, maybe you pack your lunch and save that $10 a day. And then, of course, we also want to support them by providing some of the resources, such as programs, services, products, that are all designed around facilitating that financial confidence. All right, so one of the biggest things that I say is education does not equate to taking action. Simply giving your people an idea of what to do isn't enough. Behavioral economics and behavioral finance really does play a huge part in them getting interested in and then also involved with doing something. So personal finance, as it's been said, is really only 20% head knowledge and 80% behavior. So habit building really is the most important component to financial well-being. So to summarize, before we move on, it's really important to help employees build an approach that will actually impact their behaviors. First and foremost, you need to evaluate what you already have in place so that you can help your employees. Things like including or considering gaps in current coverage, considering how the benefits that you offer to your employees are impacting their financial life. You also want to find out what your employees actually need, what they want. Of course, determine their current level of financial literacy. I think you'd be surprised that most people can't answer even 3 basic financial literacy questions. No matter how much they make, it doesn't matter based on what they know about managing money. And of course, that all leads to designing a program that helps employees better manage the money that you are paying them, creating some savings and investment strategies built around their goals. They can protect themselves and their property through things like medical insurance, income replacement coverages, property insurance, car insurance, that sort of thing. And then also just learning how to spend and borrow money effectively. So those are really the key functions of what a program should be designed to do. So with that, I think we are going to do our first polling question. So what I'd like to do is ask you to just take a moment and answer this question. Which of the following issues are you most concerned about when it comes to financial wellness within your organization? So just select one of these. Your employees might be struggling with debt. They might not be prepared for retirement. Are they asking for benefits that you just simply can't or don't currently offer? Is it all of the above? Or really are you not that concerned about financial wellness currently within your company? So go ahead and please select one of those, and then we'll move on. And thank you so much.
So thank you for responding to that. It's interesting that the most answered question here is all of the above, which really shows that employees really are dealing with these financial issues and employers are aware that it's affecting their organization. So we're going to move to a little bit more about how to solve the problem of financial wellness, and Heather Garbers is going to take it over from here. Heather?
Perfect. Thank you, Linda. So now that Michelle has covered the impact of financial stress on your employees, the question is really, what can you do to address it? I think that you would be very surprised to know the number of vendors and solutions that can be offered in the employee benefit space. And it can be really time consuming to sort through all of them and determine which are going to be the best fit for you. I would first recommend working with your broker, your consultant, to determine what solutions are available and which would be the best fit for your financial wellness strategy at your organization. So next, we're going to go through some examples of different strategies that you might want to take a look at that can help address ways to protect your employees from going into debt and to help them pay off of their debt. So here are 4 categories of financial issues that many employees face today that we can address with different employee benefit solutions. We'll start with medical debt that's caused by gaps in healthcare coverage. Then we'll review debt that's caused by loss of income due to disabilities that can affect the ability to work or own a paycheck. We'll also cover high interest debt, and we'll finish with a topic that is trending in the industry today, and that is student loan debt. So the first form of debt that we'll address is medical debt. Consider that 52% of employees today would have to borrow to pay unexpected healthcare costs, and that 42% of all personal bankruptcies can be attributed to medical expenses, and that 78% of those bankruptcies happen to somebody that had health insurance at the time. And so we find that today just offering health insurance to your employees may not be enough to keep them out of debt anymore, unfortunately. As of 2018, the average single deductible in the United States was $1,583. And so when you consider that 65% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings, you'll notice that just one unexpected medical bill could eat up their savings and put them into debt. This, coupled with things like slimmer networks, different medical groups within the same treatment facility, potentially causing someone to receive out-of-network care, or even more so, just being diagnosed with a chronic or critical illness, health insurance still leaves people with quite a bit of out-of-pocket exposure. A lot of companies, to combat this, are now including supplemental benefits in their benefit strategy that can help employees mitigate that risk. They're offering coverage on a voluntary basis, or some are even able to provide employer-funded coverage for things like hospitalizations, accidental injuries, critical illness, and telemedicine. So while we see a lot of clients opting to fund the cost of these plans for employees, I would also tell you, even just offering them on a voluntary basis can help employees protect themselves and their family from those unexpected expenses. The key to finding success with this strategy is really communication. You want to take the time to communicate the benefits of these plans effectively to ensure that employees understand how they work, how they complement their medical coverage, and so that they're taking advantage of them and using the coverage as well. The next form of debt that we'll talk about is the risk of disabling accidents or illnesses. Being disabled can cause employees to go into debt by not being able to pay just their basic living expenses, and it could also cause them to tap into their retirement savings. So the incidence of disabling injuries and illnesses are quite high, especially when you consider that 1 in 4 U.S. workers will become disabled before age 67. And while a lot of employees think that they have enough coverage through other programs, notice that 95% of disabling accidents and illnesses are not work-related and so are not covered by workers' compensation. With that, in 2018, the average Social Security benefit was $1,233 monthly, while the 2019 federal poverty line for an individual is $1,012. So as you can see, this can leave an incredible amount of financial risk for employees if they don't have coverage to protect themselves and their family if they're unable to work. If not currently offering disability coverage, on a voluntary or short-term basis, you should look at offering coverage, and that's a plan that's going to protect the employee's paycheck by providing a benefit of a % of income should they become disabled. If you're currently offering disability coverage, also review your plans to make sure that they're adequately covering your entire employee population. We always want to consult you and let you know to be aware of things like own occupation versus any occupation definition of disability. Look at your plan and review the monthly benefit caps. Is your plan providing at least 60% of income replacement for all employees? We found with one new client that 32% or 32 of their employees had less than 45% income replacement protection due to a $10,000 monthly cap on benefits. And then also look at your plan and if it includes bonus and commission in the definition of income for employees. A lot of sales professionals actually have an inadequate amount of coverage because their benefit is only protecting base income, while their actual income is mostly made up of commissions and bonuses. So if you're offering disability coverage on a voluntary basis, you also want to make sure that your employees understand the value of these coverages that they're participating in them. We typically will see at least 30% of employees enrolled in disability coverage on a voluntary basis when it's offered to them. And so if your rate of participation is lower, you might want to bring the carrier in for an education session for your employees or a refresher to remind them of how important this coverage is. Another item to keep in mind when it comes to income protection is the availability of IDI coverage. This is a plan that's targeted towards executives and management, and it can help fill gaps where the group plan might leave off. For example, that $10,000 monthly cap on benefits or covering total compensation versus just base salary. And then the last income protection plan to review would be long-term care coverage. That's another solution that's available to help protect savings and retirement funds. And there can also be some great tax advantages of that plan for both yourself and for your employees by offering it. The issue of high interest debt is another problem that plagues Americans today. And it's something that can cause people to enter a vicious cycle of debt that they just can't get out of. Consider the statistics that 51% of employed adults consistently carry a balance on their credit card, that 12 million Americans use payday loans every year, and that those payday loans can carry fees that are equivalent to an APR of almost 400%. And also that 20% of eligible 401k participants had loans outstanding against their accounts at the end of year 2014. So some solutions that are available to address this problem include things like workplace paycheck advance services. These programs give employees access to wages that have been accrued but not yet paid, and those advances are available at a lower flat fee than what they could get through an outside payday loan vendor when they can't make it through to their next payday without receiving funds. You know, a 5% flat fee to receive an advance on pay that you've accrued but has not yet been paid is a lot better of a solution for an employee than a $500 or 400% APR on a loan through a paycheck advance service. There's also companies out there that provide workplace loan services, and those are a service that gives employees access to group or employee underwriting for small loans, and then they are able to pay those small loans via payroll deduction over a 6 to 24-month period. This gives employees with bad credit or no credit access to credit based on their tenure with you as an employer. The loans will also typically take less than 24 hours for approval, and they're most commonly used to pay off debt, repair or purchase a vehicle, and for just basic home repairs. And then something to also consider is what we'll call the underbanked population of Americans today. There are a lot of people out there that, due to their financial history or lack of financial history, just don't have access to basic banking services. And so by providing a prepaid debit card, you not only open the door for them to make payments electronically for just basic expenses and to avoid check cashing fees, but you can also see an ROI as a company based on not having to administer paper paychecks. A key item to be aware of is that typically these programs will only hold you as the employer liable for payroll deduction. And so you're not held liable if the employee leaves employment with a balance due in terms of a loan, but you do want to review your contract with the vendor that you're selecting to make sure that you are not held liable for any outstanding funds or missed payments, etc. And so the last form of debt that I will address today is student loan debt. There is currently $1.3 trillion in outstanding student debt in the United States today, and I would tell you that is an outrageous number. It's a lot of debt. 7 out of 10 recent graduates have more than $37,000 in student debt when they graduate college, and so that's per person, $37,000 in outstanding debt. And then an interesting item for our discussion today is that 86% of employees that are between the ages of 21 and 36 state that they would commit to an employer for 5 years in exchange for assistance in paying off their student loans. And so student loan programs are highly valued benefits where they are offered by companies, by the employees that are able to take advantage of them. Student loan repayment and college savings services have been emerging over the past couple of years to address this issue. Student loan repayment services are essentially programs that provide employees with access to resources for their student loan debt. These programs they're really growing in popularity. More companies are engaging with them, but keep in mind the services that are offered by the different vendors are going to vary widely. They'll start with your very basic services, which is offering employees the ability to refinance and consolidate loans or to take out new loans. Some vendors also offer guidance through either an online tool or over the phone with a counselor, and that guidance helps your employees create a strategy for paying off their student loan debt, and they'll also help them review if there are grants or loan forgiveness options that are available to them, help them apply for those services as well. You also have companies out there that will help facilitate employer contributions to student loan debt. What's neat about that is that you can structure those contributions to be used as a recruitment and retention tool. So some companies, for instance, will increase their contributions based on the employee's tenure with the company. Just keep in mind with that is that there are currently no financial or tax advantages for those contributions. However, there is a bill in Congress that would extend the tax exclusion for employer-provided educational assistance to include qualified student loans. And so essentially, that bill would give any employer contributions towards student loans through these programs the same tax advantages of a tuition reimbursement program for instance. I would also say that the appeal of these programs isn't just limited to those with student loan debt, as more vendors are also offering services for 529 savings plans. These plans will help parents save for their children's future education expenses as well. And so when you're selecting a student loan repayment service, identify the features of the program that you'd like for the vendor to provide, identify your goals for that program, and then work with your broker and your consultant to evaluate the vendors in the space. Student debt services and 529 savings programs are still emerging solutions, and there are new vendors entering the space monthly. And so you want to partner with a vendor that's going to deliver that value that you're looking for, and that's also going to be around for a long time, not be purchased by a larger corporation and have a change in organization or not go out of business. So with that, I will turn the discussion over to Linda and Dave, who are going to talk about how you can measure the impact of financial wellness initiatives and also helping employees save for retirement.
Dave, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, great. Thank you. So really there are 5 ways to look at the success of your program. Obviously, there's turnover and retention. The greater your retention rates are, the people that you want to retain, the more successful your program has been. Employee assessments and engagement. This is one of those time-tested methodologies for figuring out exactly how important this is to folks. And I don't think we need to go into it here. I think everyone on this call probably understands the value of that. Benefits and claims. Number 4 is probably, I think, one of the biggest ones, which is absenteeism and productivity. I think that's what a lot of this webinar is about today, and I'll talk about it. Even though my section is really the retirement side, that absenteeism or that presenteeism that comes from that impacts productivity is really where I think, and you heard this earlier, where the impacts of not being able to prepare really are. And then the last one is retirement readiness, and that's the area that I generally focus on. So with that, when you look at helping employees save, the first thing it requires is the ability to set aside money, and that's really hard to do if people are living paycheck to paycheck. When I started working in this space, this to me was one of the most startling statistics that really highlights the difficulty of saving for retirement, and that's that nearly 80% of U.S. employees live paycheck to paycheck, and it's next to impossible to really save if that's what you're doing. And the other shocking thing about this number is it's not just for the rank and file. Around 10% of those who make over $100,000 are in the same exact boat. And quite frankly, many people on this call are probably in that same boat. And so if you or your employees are living paycheck to paycheck, almost by definition, you're not going to be able to set aside money for retirement. And any unexpected expenses that can happen will have catastrophic implications, as we've already discussed. And so the folks that continue to work past retirement age, and we'll talk a little more about this, they do so because they can't afford to retire. They can't afford to pay for their own health care. And as we saw earlier, this can be a really expensive proposition for your firm, and I'll talk more about it as well. When you look at the amount of folks that will borrow from a retirement savings plan, we talked about 20% earlier. if you extend that period out to the past 5 years, that number jumps up to 40%. So the impact of this is when employees are finally able to do the right thing and finally able to set aside some money for retirement, those unexpected events can lead to loans from their retirement savings, which takes them back significantly away from what their goal is. It has a terrible impact on that. Even if the loan's repaid, this tapping into this lender of last resort is extremely problematic because it pushes the employee further and further behind. And for some, it just leads them to stop paying altogether. They stop paying for a year, they just pay to repay their loan. And, they look at it as, sort of, well, I can't really impact this anyway. Why am I even saving for this? And that's not a place where you want your employees to be. It's a downward spiral that doesn't just impact those employees. It's got a real cost to the firm as these employees age. And it's no secret that that's exactly what's happening in the U.S. today. It's the Silver Tsunami. And it started back in January 2011. And that's the first month that the first baby boomers turned 65. And this is obviously part of a cohort of about 79 million individuals in the United States. And they make up a quarter of the U.S. population. So that number of folks turning 65 has grown. And that now averages about 10,000 boomers turning 65 every single day. Which the number for me is sort of mind-boggling. And here's how this all ties together. So in May of 2018, nearly 20% of Americans aged 65 and over told the government that they were still working. As a comparison, during the summer of 1986, that rate for those folks working over the age of 65 was 10.8%. So roughly double. So twice as many folks in that age group, times many more people in that age group, are still working as of age 65, which ties into the stat that's on this page, that number of boomers who plan to work in retirement. So you've got folks that are working longer, working retirement. Some of them are doing it because they're genuinely excited and they enjoy what they're doing, but some are present at the office because they have to be, because that's how they're paying for their health care. And that leads to a pretty significant challenge from obviously a quality of life perspective for those employees, quality of life perspective for those who don't want to work past 65 but are planning to do it because that's the only way that they're going to be able to make ends meet. And especially an issue for those who are planning to work past 65 but don't yet realize they're going to get hit with something else, whether it's a physical ailment, whether it's an inability to continue working at that same job. They're going to have a problem that they're going to run into, and a significant portion, those 62%, are not actually going to be able to work past 65. So they're really not prepared. And again, that drives a significant cost to your firm as well. And so when you get to the costs, I'll do the same kind of math. When you look at average new hires at 38 years, the average is $60,200, and then there's a healthcare cost of $4,800 and a workman's comp of $2,689, and that's at the age of 38, so $67,000. If you look at 65, that number, those corresponding numbers turn out to be about $101,000. So basically a difference of $34,000. You multiply that by the number of folks that you have in your workforce over that age, and then you can get to obviously a very significant number very, very quickly. And so it sets up a really interesting conversation that we'll have a little bit later on, which is, well, could we use this money more effectively if we spent it differently earlier? And I think that's what's starting to happen in the workplace with some of the more sort of progressive companies or forward-thinking companies. What I should say is this $34,000 doesn't even include other insurance costs that might affect a physically intensive industry. It also doesn't include or capture the cost of lower productivity or engagement levels for those folks that are kind of just suffering from presenteeism. And the numbers don't capture the human capital impacts of the individuals who are blocked behind those who are stuck at work. And the impact of losing these talented folks, and the range that I generally see for this is somewhere between 3 and 5 people per stuck person, per presentee person, that are held behind, and the loss of productivity or the loss of value that occurs when those people leave the firm because they feel like they just can't progress. But the good news is there are some ways that we really can improve. And just like what my colleague said a little bit earlier on, there are some steps that we can take across the board that help out, and these help out different parts of or different segments of your employee base. So offering ways to fund an emergency savings account, establishing retirement income planning programs, improve the current retirement plan design, that's a big one, implement additional retirement plan solutions, and engage with a financial advisor, an education coach or specialist. These are all things that can help to help better prepare folks for a better retirement, which enables you to, again, not have to spend some of those monies that we talked about earlier. So the first one is to improve retirement readiness by offering ways for employees to fund an emergency account. This obviously helps all employees. It's not just percentages that we talked about. Even if for those that have an emergency account, there's still gaps. There's still issues that come into place. and so when you take the statistics of those living paycheck to paycheck, helping your employees fund an emergency savings account is a great starting point. We know from adult learning that the research shows that even taking a small action can create the momentum and the confidence that helps spur people into taking additional action. So just getting that started is a critical piece. One of the programs that created a lot of buzz over the last couple of years is SunTrust Momentum Up program, where they gave the employees $1,000 towards an emergency fund and an additional day off if they got their finances in order. And there have been a bunch of other firms that have followed this same path. I haven't seen the measurements come out of this yet, but you have to imagine that for those that are concerned about that broken refrigerator, the car breakdown, the things that really kind of cause them to go into a tailspin, taking that weight off their shoulders that we talked about before frees them up to actually do a better job. And the impact, again, is, from all the health costs and all the impacts to those employees can be significant when you measure that across your employee base. The next one to talk about is establishing a retirement income program for those within the 10-year retirement window, sometimes called the red zone. The challenge with just offering like a pre-retirement seminar for a lot of folks is they don't see themselves as a target audience. They don't think of themselves as retiring. And, again, we saw the number, I think it was 62% that said they are planning to work past, 65% that are planning to work past their retirement age, their typical retirement age. So they don't see themselves in this bucket, but they need to. And they need to be specifically targeted with with one-on-one meetings are always the best. But with the task of creating a retirement income plan that will help them understand exactly where they are and how to structure savings and investment for future spending. And this is one of those ones that's personal for me. I remember when my father retired, and he had to stop working. He was actually disabled, and he had to stop working when he hit probably about age 70. He was sort of forced out, and he thought he was going to travel the world. Now, he had about $150,000 saved. That's not travel the world money, at least not in today's day and age. But he really thought he had enough money to do that. This retirement readiness and understanding and creating a metric around retirement readiness is a critical part for folks that are getting really close to this time to help them decide what they need to do. It's also the time where you've got this stretch that you're allowed to do, where you can increase your savings for your retirement account so they can do more this time. So that combined potentially with working a little bit longer can allow them to begin taking Social Security a little bit later, which allows them to maximize that benefit and give them greater flexibility. So this retirement readiness is really a key activity as well. The other is improving your current retirement plan design. We talk about this in the retirement industry as the autos, the auto enrollment, auto escalation. And the reality of this is, behavioral economic research shows again and again that inertia is absolutely the enemy of all voluntary benefits. And while we all know that we should be saving more and we've got the intentions to do it, a lot of times we just don't. And so implementing a retirement plan that has auto features removes those perils of procrastination and helps get employees going on the right foot. And it's got to be both, really, because auto enrollment gets more folks involved, but typical auto enrollment levels are at like 3%. And the reality is that your typical American needs to save between 10 and 15% per year to be able to have a successful retirement. And so, the reality of this is that auto enroll piece is great, but there's got to be auto escalation as well that gets them to, above 10% savings per year. And, a lot of firms will say, well, we don't want to do that because we don't want our employees to get upset that we're setting this amount of money aside. And in general, what you find, and I've seen this time and time again, thousands of cases of this, the amount of folks that complain about auto escalate or auto enroll as employees is less than 5%. It's such a small number. So this is an easy step that can be taken. And of course, increasing the match that the company provides is obviously also will have positive impact to this, or doing a stretch match, which causes them to, again, have to save more. Whatever gets them to that 10 to 15% range is absolutely critical. there's a lot of talk about this in our space, and there's a lot of talk, and from political pundits and people who say that our system has failed those retirees who don't have enough money to retire. And the reality of it is, it hasn't. It's very, very clear. They need to save 10 to 15%. If you don't save 10 to 15%, it's going to be very tough to retire. So that's the goal of improving the retirement readiness. When you look at, for the executive levels and leadership in your organization, there are things that you can do, such as deferred compensation or cash balance plans that help more highly paid executives meet their retirement objectives. Because we got a cap on how much we can save through a 401k, these are typically the plans that help executives put more money aside. These are also the programs that help keep executives at the firms. So these become very valuable to executives, and losing out on these deferred compensation programs is an impactful thing. So it helps you keep the folks that you really do want to keep there. And it is, I think, one of the most underused capabilities within the retirement space altogether. The way you want to evaluate your additional solutions for your highly compensated people by helping to understand how much does it adequately replace their income. And the target, you'll see targets between 60 and 80% is what you want to target for replacing income. Then on top of that, you also have Social Security. I've seen those numbers being challenged recently, but I think the reality of this is that a deferred comp program can help bridge the gap for executives who otherwise are not going to be able to save enough money in a tax preferred structure, and allows the firm to have a better overall package for recruiting and retaining these folks. And then the last one that I'll talk about is engagement. And, it's engaging with financial education, coaching, and advice. Really, a financial advisor is one of the most important things that anybody can do, anybody on this call or any of your employees can do. An advisor can help your employees understand exactly where they are in their preparations. And for some folks, this will light a fire. For others, it'll help them to understand that they're better off than they previously anticipated. And both of those are good outcomes, because the reality is, once you pick up the knowledge, this in and of itself gives some confidence. If you add in a roadmap of steps to take, to be proactive, to take matters into their own hands, you'll see an improvement in health and productivity that you really can measure. And I think with that, I'm turning this back to you, Linda, to talk about measurement and next steps.
Thank you. So this concludes the discussion portion of today's webinar. I'm so sorry. I'm skipping ahead. So I did want to chat a little bit about some of the business outcomes you can measure. So one of the things that's most important when you are looking at this is the ability to actually measure outcomes to show that the things that you are doing have an impact on both the business as well as your employees. So some of those things that you can measure would include increases in enrollment and contribution to retirement plans. So certainly, as Dave was mentioning, especially if you have auto enroll and auto increases, you'll see those increases in your retirement plan. Do you have a reduction in 401k loans or hardship withdrawals? As mentioned, we know that many of the employees are withdrawing from their 401ks to cover these expenses, these unexpected expenses, which is creating, the dual challenge of now not having enough for retirement later. Reduction in absenteeism rates, looking at your participants who are in the program versus those who are not. Reduction in garnishments. Certainly, the fact that employees' wages are garnished is a sign of that financial challenge that they're dealing with. So measuring where you are today, implementing some of these programs, and measuring after if you're seeing reduction in garnishments. The reduced turnover, while that's a softer measure, it's harder to track to the specific things that you might be implementing under financial wellness. It is definitely something that you can look at and see if, in fact, you're seeing reduced turnover by offering your employees really these programs that, based on all of the information that you've seen today, they really need. And then income replacement percentage. So how much are your employees receiving that income replacement? Okay, and with that, it concludes the discussion portion of today's webinar. I want to thank you all for attending. Michelle Clark will be answering some of the audience questions that we received during a Facebook Live session. This is something that we're trying today. It will be starting in a few minutes, about probably 20 or 25 minutes at 1:15 Central Standard Time. So again, you can see the information here on the screen. If you are interested in joining this Facebook Live session, please go to Hub International's Facebook page in order to tune in. We're glad you could join us today to discuss financial wellness. I know that many of you asked if you're going to be receiving a copy of this. Absolutely. All attendees will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. And I want to thank you again. And before you go, please take a moment to answer one last polling question that we have for you.